Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual meetup for Azure User Group Manila. My name is Marilag de Matulax Venivig, and I am one of the organizers of Azure User Group Manila. Welcome po. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. It's been a while, so I'm really happy to see you all on the live stream. And thank you for joining us today. I'm really, really excited to kick off the year with our first virtual events. So thank you for supporting us. And yes, today we have a very interesting topic, a topic that I really love. It's all about cloud governance on Azure with Peter Villar. I'm going to introduce him shortly, but first I'd like to take this time to invite everyone to join our user group and our meetup group and our Facebook group as well. We're always on the lookout for members and volunteers and presenters actually. So if you're really interested in sharing your knowledge on Azure, you're welcome to get in touch with us. So my co-organizer, Joanna Ipolito, she's going to be here shortly as well. We're really working hard to make the group more active this year. So hopefully you can help us. So if you're interested in doing talks, presentations, workshops, please reach out to us through our meetup page, or if you're on Facebook, we also have a Facebook group. So please join us, or if you know someone that you think would be interested to help us, either as a sponsor or as a volunteer or as a speaker, please let them know about our group so that they can join us as well. Yeah, so what have we been doing? Medyo busy like everyone else. So last year we had a couple of virtual events, but we had actually one event na hindi public pero it went on for several days. So for the first time, we tried to do this Azure study certification study hall. Initially Azure Fundamentals, and it was a great success. But since it was a pilot, so we actually only invited a couple of young folks, some of them scholars from one of the other organizations that I'm part of, ulap.org. And what we did is we did like a 3-day training for free, together with some of our volunteers and some Azure experts, Azure MVPs, who's just running through the Microsoft Learn modules for Azure Fundamentals. So we did that together with the students, so to help them with the certification, and a couple of them actually got the certification as well, using the free certification for the Azure fundamentals courses that you can find on Microsoft. So it's been really fun and we learned a lot. So hopefully that's something that we can also do again this year. And there are some events that we're already planning. So there's the Global Azure Bootcamp happening, I think around March. There's no date yet. And I'm still working closely with some of the Filipinos Azure MVPs and Microsoft MVPs for some collaboration and events. And also, we're still an active part of the Philippine tech community. So if you're interested in learning about any sort of tech you can think of, we actually, the Philippines, have a very active landscape for this. We have a lot of communities. So check out PH Tech Community. There's also Facebook group for that. And I'm also working closely with the .NET user group. So we're really active. We just want to tell everyone, kung na-miss nyo kami, we're still here and so happy to have this first event. So I'm going to invite Peter here on stage now. And here he comes. Hi, Peter. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Marilag.
Nag-dinner ka na ba?
Hindi pa. So, 1 meal a day lang ako eh. So,
Wow. 1 meal a day. I cannot do.
yes.
Well, I tried that too. It's like intermittent fasting. Yung 5-2 ba yun? Pero hindi naman everyday. Like everyday yan, 1 meal.
Yes, every day. Siguro simula nung COVID kasi parang mas na-enjoy ko siya. Yung iniiwasan ko kasi yung crash ng energy in the middle of the day. Pag kumakain ka lagi, parang na-experience ko yun. So, 1 meal a day na lang ako.
Oh my gosh, I cannot do that. Especially kapag may event ako na ganito. I like, eating my snacks, but I totally get you. So I'm also, I know, because I've been reading, I just read this book called Glucose Revolution. I forgot the name of the author, pero it's all about this, sugar crash when we eat. So
Yes.
So prinomote ko daw, no? So it's totally outside the topic, off topic to, pero Glucose Goddess on Instagram, she talks a lot about how sugar affects her body, and that's the crash that you're experiencing. So very interesting to know.
Yes.
Di ka na ba nagugutom? Na-control mo na yung gutom mo?
After siguro 1 month, yun yung pinakamahirap kasi nag-aano pa, nag-adjust yung body. Pero after that, parang it comes normal na lang.
I don't know if that's gonna be normalized ever sa buhay ko, pero I salute you on that. Ang hirap no, galing ko lang sa Philippines noong December, so wala akong ibang ginawa kundi kumain. So I really don't know how you do it. Here, kayang-kaya kong hindi kumain, like, ng the whole, day, only sa dinner, especially yung nagpa-fasting, pero dyan sa Philippines, impossible. So, yeah, happy to hear that. So, yeah, I will give the stage to you, Peter. Very good topic on cloud governance and very much needed for our members here also. So I also work a lot with some large enterprises where cloud governance is at the center. So it'd be nice to learn more around it.
All right. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm just gonna pull your screen here. And just want to remind our friends here who's watching this live stream, feel free to post your questions and comments on the chat box if you're on Facebook or if you're in YouTube. I can see them, and then at the end of the session, we can have a short Q&A, and then I can forward your questions to Peter, and we'll try our best to answer your questions. And if you are watching the recording, um, not sure if you can still see your comments, but otherwise, you can, like I said, get in touch with us, join our Meetup group, join our Facebook group, and then let's have a discussion around this event. All right, Peter,
All right.
enjoy.
Thanks. Yep. So good evening, good afternoon, or good morning to everyone who's listening or watching. So the topic that I have is more on, well, Azure Cloud Governance. So the title will be From Chaos to Control, Azure Governance. So Azure Governance, as you know, a journey that every organization can take to gain visibility and control over their Azure environment. So it primarily involves implementing best practices and tools for managing resources, costs, security, and compliance. So overall, the journey from case to control in Azure requires a commitment to ongoing education and training, willingness to experiment with new approaches, a proactive and flexible and adaptable attitude. So I guess that's how I would like to preface this presentation. And also, I'd like to give a short intro about myself. So, for anyone that doesn't know me, so the name is Peter Villar. So, I'm currently an Azure Cloud Architect at Cognizant. So, I've just started with the company. So, this January, and so it's more of a lead architect type of role. So, it mostly revolves around migration of services, applications, and also designing infrastructure for cloud native services or applications that the company supports for their client. So for myself, I'm a self-taught architect or engineer, in my own words, because I started from the bottom and coming from the song, now we're here. So I would like to say that I might be an exception, not the rule. And I've taken the non-standard path of growing and learning to get to my career goals. So I believe that with the motto of learn and learn, relearn, and then repeat, you can basically get a lot of knowledge and anything that you would like to tackle with life or maybe in your professional career. So I started my journey with cloud computing about 5 years ago. It's more of a operations management type of role, and pretty much monitoring the whole Azure infrastructure estate, as we call them, and just basically doing what a lot of system administrator or system engineer would do on a day-to-day basis. So um, monitoring incidents, and also fulfilling service requests will be a typical day. But from time to time, I work on more advanced problems and assist with some architects and fix specific problems as they come within the company operations. So I guess yeah, that's a short intro about myself and what my path has been for the past 10 years. So I've been in the industry for 10 years now, and yes, as I mentioned, I started as a service desk specialist up until now as a Azure Cloud Architect. So I guess like we can proceed with the actual Azure Cloud Governance. So in a nutshell, this is the process of establishing and maintaining a set of policies, standards, and procedures to manage and control the whole Azure resources in an organization. So with cloud governance, it is important for ensuring that the resources are used in compliance with organizational policies, security standards, and regulatory requirements, and they are used in a cost-effective and efficient manner. And well, basically, by implementing the cloud governance, organization can improve their security posture, reduce the risk of data breaches, and optimize the use of Azure resources. This can also improve the overall performance, scalability, and security of their cloud-based infrastructure, and ultimately help them achieve their business objectives more effectively. So I guess the first step on actually having governance over your cloud infrastructure is regaining control. So for regaining control, I can think of three main topics that would be included on the actual meeting with the stakeholders and anyone that would be part of the whole transformation or for the whole strategy. So maybe number one, cost management. So cost management mainly is implementing a cost management strategy that can help you regain control by identifying areas where costs can be reduced, such as through policy automation. And another thing is security. So, reviewing and strengthening security protocols can help you regain control by protecting your organization from potential cybersecurity threats. So, this includes identifying vulnerabilities, implementing security best practices, and regularly monitoring for suspicious activity. So, in Azure, they have a lot of tools or services that you can use this specific activities. So I can name Azure Sentinel maybe as an example, and also Microsoft Defender for cloud as your main cloud security posture management tool that you can use for Azure in and even for AWS and Google Cloud. So the last one would be compliance. So ensuring compliance with the relevant regulations and industry standards can help you regain control by avoiding costly fines and penalties. So these include staying up to date on changes to regulations and implementing processes to ensure compliance is maintained. All right, so we're on the topic of regaining control. I can think of a four-step strategy that anyone can use for the organization in operating in an organized, compliant, and efficient manner. So, step one would be reviewing. So, this typically involves evaluating the adherence of a cloud of Azure cloud service or application to a set of regulatory or industry standards. The step two would be organize, is the act of establishing a clear governance structure to oversee IT infrastructure and processes with clear lines of accountability, roles, and responsibility. For auditing, it refers to the process of evaluating the organization's compliance with relevant laws, regulations, and internal policies. And lastly, would be enforce or enforcement. This will refer to the act of ensuring compliance, and including taking corrective measures, doing call out procedures, and providing an exemption to the process. So altogether, these steps works to ensure that the organization is operating in a responsible and accountable manner and can help you prevent and address issues such as fraud, waste, and abuse of services. All right, so for the first step, review. I think you can see about 4 questions that can actually guide you on how to do the cloud governance strategy in your own organizations. And so, well, it is important to have a clear understanding of overall spending in order to make informed decisions about resource allocation and budgeting. This may include looking at both current spending levels as well as projected future spending. And number 2 would be identifying where funds are being allocated and can provide insight into the effectiveness of current spending and where adjustments may need to be made. And this may include looking at specific departments, projects, or initiatives. And there is a number 1 action, especially for a larger organization. Compliance with laws and regulations is essential for any organization, regardless of the current size. And maybe the last question that you will ask is identifying, or the next step is identifying areas of opportunity that can help you prioritize efforts and make the most of available resources. So with the review in Azure, you will have at least 3 that I can think of, 3 services or tools that you can use. So number 1 would be Resource Graph. So it's a powerful tool that allows you to discover and query your Azure resources at scale. So it's kind of related doing KQL queries on Log Analytics workspace. So it's kind of the same, but it's much more powerful. So it is exposed to the main Azure API backend, and pretty much you can query what needs to be done to have a look what current resources, what's the current state of your Azure infrastructure. So another tool would be cost management, and for cost management, you will see this tool or service uh, on every step along the way, because it really is the most powerful tool to look into, especially if you're really particular on the spending that you're currently doing in Azure. So yeah, and the last one would be Azure Security Center. So for Security Center, I believe this is now under the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, but it's referenced as ASC, default standards or policy, if you look into the portal within Azure. So it has been updated and combined with other services to have a holistic approach in compliance and security. So this is a unified platform that provides you with advanced threat protection across your entire Azure um, infrastructure or your environment. So step number 2 in the strategy would be organize. And so these 3 items will help you produce a solid strategy on how to implement controls and streamlining your current tenant rules and policies. So 1 is creating a subscription hierarchy that can help you streamline the organization and management of your organization, making it easier to understand which ones are being used and which ones are not. This can ultimately save your company time and money. I've been on a recent compliance or governance project, so I can definitely say that this really helps. So with Azure, you have your root tenant group, and then you will have your management group. So you can divide specific lines of businesses or departments using the management groups, and you can assign different policies that can be, well, that can be assigned to that specific group. if it's actually for limiting the access or just basically preventing them using specific services. So number two would be categorizing subscriptions and resources based on usage. And this will help you understand how they are being used, who is using them, and what impact they are having on your organization. And lastly would be applying consistent access rights across all subscriptions. As I mentioned earlier, this can also include resources, which helps you ensure that only authorized users have access to sensitive information and all users have the necessary access to perform their job functions. And this can improve security and productivity in your organization. So, number one example for maybe um, locating or controlling user rights would be privilege identity management, or PIM as we call them. So with PIM, you can assign a specific role to expire in a specific time frame, but you can also assign it so non-expiring, but that's not really the best practice. So it's more of a way on auditing what roles does a specific user have on your tenant or on your whole Azure environment. So with Organize, you have these tools in Azure that you can pretty much use. So I mentioned the management groups. I also, well, I forgot about tagging. So tagging is, well, it has been recently updated to target more resources or services in Azure that can help you categorize a lot of things in an easier manner. And for RBAC or role-based access controls that I mentioned earlier, you can use PIM to pretty much control who has access, who can get or extract information from the tenant, and who does not have even the slightest permission on viewing the information in your tenant. So this is a great example on how you can plan on your organization's structure in terms of the root management group and the other management group, plus tagging rules and also thinking about role-based access control. All right, so step number three on the strategy would be audit. So audit, these are things that you will need to take into consideration how you will properly audit everything in your tenant and work out the best approach to support both business and technology users concurrently. So developing policies for your Azure environment can help you ensure consistency and compliance across your organization. These policies can cover areas such as resource allocation, security, and cost management, and can be used to guide decision making and resource management. Another thing is applying budgets in Azure. So this can help you control and monitor your spending on Azure resources. With budgets, you can set limits on resource usage, receive alerts when spending approaches or exceeds those limits. This can also help you stay on top of your costs and make better decisions about resource usage. So auditing the impact of your policies can help you understand how you are being implemented or how they are being implemented and whether they are achieving the desired outcomes. This can help you identify areas for improvement and adjust as needed. So getting ready for enforcement of your policies can help you ensure compliance and consistency across your organization. So this can include reviewing and updating policies, training users on their responsibilities, and putting in place the necessary tools and processes to ensure policies are effective. So on the audit step, you can see again cost management and Azure policy. So Azure policy and cost management allows the organization to enforce compliance and resource governance. So while also giving visibility into and and controlling over the Azure spend. So it allows you to set policies to automatically enforce rules and take action on resources that provides cost analysis and optimization recommendations to help you save money on your Azure bills. So this helps your organization to stay within the budget, maintain compliance, and optimize your cloud infrastructure costs. So the last step on this strategy would be enforce or enforcement. So changing policies from recommendation to enforcement is important. And so as I mentioned earlier, so it ensures compliance and consistency across the environment. So maybe the things that you will take into consideration is for enforcement, adding resolution actions to your policies can help automate the process of addressing non-compliant resources. And for example, you can use Azure policy to automatically terminate non-compliant resources or send notifications to appropriate parties. So I don't want to be or to give a lot of information about the last task that I've been given with my last company. So the way that we do the notifications is on a 30, 60, 90 days period. And it's more of a sending the application owner, for example, these notifications so we can ask them directly why they're not fixing the specific application or the specific service that they have, which is showing non-compliance on our monitoring. And so on that or with that step, we can also work with them directly if there needs to be an exemption for that specific application or for that specific resource so that the scanning service that we have will not trigger a flag for that specific service. So another thing going back would be enforcing budgets in Azure, which helps you control and monitor the spending on resources. So by creating and assigning budgets, you can set limits on resource usage and then receive alerts. And as I mentioned earlier, if it's approach or exceeds the limits, this can pretty much save you a lot of money on having the notification before or after the limit has been reached. So creating a new subscription that are already compliant with your policies and budgets can help you ensure that your environment remains consistent and in compliance. So the way that I think about this is utilizing landing page. So you can put effort on um, designing and also creating the landing page for your whole other department that well so if another department is being onboarded into Azure, you can have a template for your landing page and then you can just deploy the template and then work with the department directly if what other information is required. So it's really case to case basis. Some of the templates might be too strict for the usage that they'll be or for the actual work that they'll be doing on the subscription, but sometimes it must be or sometimes it can be too loose for their liking and they want to narrow down and implement more security controls on how they will work on that specific subscription. So lastly, overall, by making changes to the policies and adding resolution actions, enforcing budgets, and creating new subscriptions with a template that are already compliant with the policies, you can help ensure that your Azure environment is well governed and your organization is adhering to best practices and regulatory requirements. So for enforcement, you can see again cost management with the addition of Azure Blueprints and Azure Policy. So Blueprints and policies are both tools within the Azure platform that can be used for governance and compliance, while for cost management, it's a feature that can be used to optimize the monitoring spending on resources. So using these three services allow every administrator to create and manage custom policies to ensure compliance with organization standards and enable the creation of reusable templates for deploying and managing Azure resources. Altogether, these tools can help organizations ensure that the Azure resources are deployed in a compliant and cost-effective manner. So I guess that will be the bulk of the presentation. So it's just more of a high level overview on what specific tools and services Azure provides within the platform that you can use if you're doing cloud governance strategy for any specific company or organization. So there's nothing that, or there's no one size fits all approach, especially in the cloud. So it's more of a knowing, it's more of knowing about the requirements that the specific client or the company requires, and then putting effort into or focusing into what is required by the client and just work on other things that would help um, the business and also the users and accessing the services in a well efficient manner so that I can think of. And yeah, I guess I've been allocated 45 minutes, but I guess it's just 30 minutes that I'm able to consume, and that's all about my presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Peter. Wow, I'm actually really impressed by your story when you talk about yourselves. I'm sorry I didn't get to know that in the beginning that you really started from scratch, right? So it must have been a journey for you. So maybe Siguro before we proceed to the technical questions, let's unpack a little bit your journey because I know that a
Sure.
lot of our friends here, Sash or User Group Manila, are still learning. So some of them is probably just exploring Azure now. Some of them have been working with it for a couple of years. So we have diverse membership, right? Pero marami akong nami-meet na talagang for them, they're really interested to get into the whole cloud ecosystem. But sometimes the blocker is the opportunity.
Yes.
So maybe their current job, they're still, in the starting phase. It depends. So it's different journeys for each of the companies, right? So maybe my question would be, when you started out learning Azure, so we're gonna proceed with the governance later on. But when you started learning out Azure, were you already working with it from day one, or you were doing it on the side, um, on top of your existing job at that time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think I was just doing it on the side, but for me, my cloud journey has been early. So I can remember way back 2012 or 13, I already have an idea that cloud will be, well, it will be a big thing. But at that point in time, I guess there's a lot of talk about cloud not being successful in terms of being used in the enterprise because they call it like, or the analogy that they have is you're just using someone else's computer, which is they call it in the cloud. So it's a negative remark about cloud, but that doesn't, or it did not um back me down on the idea that it's impressive that if you're using cloud services, you just need to have an internet connection and then pwede ka nang mag-connect or gamitin yung service na yun. So I was doing that on the side, and then I went into a journey of learning everything in Azure because yung sa company it's more of a Windows ecosystem. So I think it's a no-brainer to just utilize Azure because the services is more of a it's a replica of everything. So if you can see Windows, you can easily get what the Azure portal does in a way. So ganun ata yung tingin ko sa kanya. And ayun, so trainings and even Microsoft Learn is a big tool that I've utilized on gaining a lot of knowledge and some YouTube channels, especially for under Jan Savils. Yun talaga yung naging resource ko on learning a lot more. And I've just recently learned na connected naman pala siya kasi sa Microsoft. That's why once he presents the information, parang ang dami niyang alam about the topic. So I really love how he breaks down every topic na mas maintindihan ng public.
Right, thank you. So it's really, they were really wrong, all those people who spread the bad rumors about cloud. And there is still a couple of them out there in the world that's still very much pessimistic about cloud. And understandably so, because if we really look into what you have presented with the governance, so um, this is one of the this is one of the sources of sort of frustration for many companies who want to adopt cloud because all of a sudden it explodes into something really uncontrollable, and then they want a lot of them wants to just go back on prem and run their own data center because at least there they have 100% control of everything, whereas now they have maybe x% control of their infrastructure, their data, or their landscape, and then a remaining percentage of that control is beyond them. So now it's two types of control that they have to manage instead of just one. um, but the good thing is what you showed is that you do have tools, right? Number one is that you do have tools, maybe way too many tools at some point. That's why I really like your strategy there, organizing your thoughts, your what do we want to do first. um, so having said that, what is maybe your advice for um, I would say companies who are, uh, I would say, not transition. We're beyond transition from being on-prem to cloud. There has been a lot of talks around that now, and a lot of resources, but more transitioning from now we have adopted cloud, and now we're in the journey um, of app modernization or innovation, and all of a sudden from POC projects to migration, now we are looking into large teams as sort of as developers starting to build stuff um, on their own. So how do you control these kinds of things from blowing up? So let's focus on, like, especially on developing solutions that runs on Azure, and then let's say you have 100 different products or digital products you want to launch in the next couple of 10 years. So if you're in the governance team, where would you want to put your energy on in the very beginning?
So I guess in the very beginning, what I presented is really important. So everyone, every stakeholder should have a discussion on the strategy. So I guess it's really important on the fourth step. You can easily get a well functioning strategy if you follow it. So first, I guess it's more important that you're not yet on the migration phase to discuss everything on how you will manage everything once you're in the cloud. So I guess reviewing what are the specific things that you will have, or sorry, maybe it's more important to think of how your application works and then what will be the security controls that you are really keen into implementing once you migrated into the cloud. So I'm thinking like this because based from experience, one workflow that can blow up into at least 5 or 10 workflows once you're into the cloud. And controlling everything is like chasing, or it's like a game of cat and mouse. So for me, you should have your standard controls already implemented into the subscription, per se, if you're doing Azure. And then once you have your workflow migrated into Azure, you can then test with just specific teams or departments that you can tap for assistance, maybe test their workflow, it's working properly. And then from that point, just move inward on how to secure the whole subscription without affecting the developer experience. So some other companies they have this aim on having a more easier approach on developing things into the cloud, but there are also other um, teams in the cloud. Say for example, for infrastructure teams, they want to take full control about with the virtual machines, with the scale sets. But in the end, I think you can go with a compromise, so you can have a better experience, and also you'll have the benefit of cloud governance working for you, not against you.
That is really very insightful. So I really like the word you use there with compromise, because that actually brings me to the next question. Because you know how it is, how people feel about governance, especially the developers. You know, like we want to be productive. Now you've given us this tool, but then we cannot deploy anything because of the policies. That's why I also like the part you mentioned that in certain situations, you need to have a process in place uh, to have custom policy for different kind of scenarios. That's what you're saying. So be so just to maybe frame your answer there. Day one, like our member here, Annalene, has mentioned, you should already have governance built in from day one. That's also true. Don't wait when you're already building stuff. So when you're still migrating or still considering, you need to think about the governance. And I like what you said, isolate it first, plan out how you would design your subscription, your landing zone, your management groups in this, who's going to get access. And then you said analyze what is the purpose of the application that you're building, because um, that's really how you would find out. So will the standard policies and governance that you have in place apply to this application? If yes, do that. If not, have some exception. So there is always some exception to the rule, like you said you were with the learning in learning cloud. All right, thank you. So did you have any experience with this kind of compromise where you have, I don't know if you're part of a governance in the team, like there's a certain policy and then needed to maybe change it, or because of a specific need from a specific type of scenario or application, and how did that
So
work?
yeah, actually, it's a growing pain with the previous team that I've been part of. Well, I'm part of the governance team more on into the implementation of the policies. So the way that we tackle the compromise is doing exceptions to the policy, and also just marking that specific resource in Azure, that maybe adding a tag that the application owner requested to exempt this specific resource from this specific policy, because we have an automated tool that scans every Azure resource on the tenant. So if it doesn't see any exemption, it's going to flag that specific resource, and the owner will be notified. So working with the application owner and also doing an exemption process would be beneficial on providing the best way, or how could be converted into a win-win situation. But I know some owners or some application owners wish to at least have zero security with the application, but that's not going to happen, because that's why you have the governance or the compliance team nagging you to have the changes with that specific service in Azure. So, say for example, we have the power to actually make the changes on our own and then just notify the application owner. either way, they can also have their team work on the changes and then notify us on the the date or how it was implemented. And then after, we will run a scan and then check if the policy relating to that specific service is no longer flagging the compliance issue.
All right, and you use Azure policy for this. When you mention policy, it's your
Yes.
is that a custom tool or is that a tool in Azure that does the scan and then compares the actual state of the resources against the policies?
So a lot of the policies is under Azure policy, but the automated tool that we use is Wiz, so WIZ, a cybersecurity tool that actually it's not only for Azure, it can work with any cloud, and it's more of a automated way on checking your whole Azure estate or cloud estate because it's much more easier in terms of if you're extracting 10,000 virtual machines and you will need to audit if every virtual machine is compliant with the current Azure patch that has been released. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, tools are great. So let's talk about the people behind this process, behind governance. What kind of roles do you think are very important in an organization to be able to carry out this strategy that you mentioned? So both for the governance team and also for the ones who are implementing the app development side or solutions developers. So what kind of roles do you need to have present that needs to really connect together? Because I'm sure if it's a big company, it has to be a bit more structured. So you even if you're a small company, you need to define these roles already in your organizations, so that when you grow bigger, then you already have those people in place. So
yes.
can you mention a few?
So regarding the roles, well, a global administrator is um, one of the roles that I can think of, which a global admin will have most of the access, or I think all of the access within the tenant or the subscription. And then you can think of co-administrators. So with co-administrators, it's one level below global admin. So basically, they will have sort of the same permissions within the tenant, but they won't be able to make specific modifications that can affect the whole tenant. And then you can drill down to maybe custom roles that is typically, well, within Azure, you have a lot of built-in roles that you can use. So you can have maybe an application administrator, you can have a virtual machine administrator or contributor. And then if you want to lock down a lot of controls, you can just have most of them readers for that specific service. And I know there are other roles or built-in roles in Azure for Key Vault data access. So they have segregated the access with the Key Vault data plane and also the Key Vault, just the dashboard or the native pane that you can manage the configuration for Key Vault. So yeah, it's important to think of if we're looking into or we're talking about developers, what specific roles that they will have on deploying the code into Azure. So I can think of if you're using Azure DevOps, at least maybe create a pipeline that would allow the developer to deploy their code into the web app service. And then once the web app service is created, maybe do a manage identity for that web app if it requires to save a key into a key vault or maybe save any data that it has processed into a storage account. So there is a lot of things to basically drill down and learn when you're doing the lockdown on access. So part of the presentation, I guess, is more of I was telling that it's important to have continuous learning about the cloud, and it's not just the developers, or maybe the technology owner. So it's for the whole company. So everyone should understand how cloud changed the way that we're working. Um, so compared to on-prem and to now.
That's a great thought. I'm with you on that, especially like when you start talking about the people behind all this management and building applications. So really having a very deep understanding of these roles. And when I meant roles, so you mentioned all the role-based access controls or the built-in ones. So sometimes you also have custom roles. So I think you have around 250 plus standard roles just on Azure and that's only on the control plane of most of these resources. So, you cannot expect just one person to be able to right away memorize all the permission scopes for each of these roles that you assign on the policy and the resources, but maybe start with like the basic roles that can allow you to be more productive, to do self-service, to deploy what you need. You mentioned like you need a role for to run your CI/CD pipelines, and then maybe you need a role to be able to configure some of these things, and then maybe you need different roles that will be affected when you're in development, or then a different set of roles when you're on production. You use manage identity if you want to connect resources together. Maybe you use service principles for running some pipelines instead of people, because sometimes we don't fully trust people to do these things. But yeah,
Yes.
so certainly a lot of things. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that. I'm sure a lot of people learn a lot today. Also, especially we have very limited cognitive resource and limited energy, right? We also want to have a life, so there's a lot of things that one should learn. But we're not alone. We're a whole army making clouds beneficial for everyone. So thanks for joining us. There are some more maybe questions from the audience. Yeah, so let me just thank you, Annalyn, for this question. So her question is: have you experienced remediating non-compliant resources and then suddenly an application stopped working or no longer working? Ooh, I've seen this before, but I'll let you answer.
Yes, well, I guess this is a most common issue with regards to non-compliant resources. So the last one that I've handled is more of updating the API, or sorry, the web application firewall, in blocking some ports, so for it to be compliant. So I guess this was, the port is only specifically to be used for SFTP. And then so basically we just unlock for SFTP and the whole application just went down due to the changes, because on top of that, other ports are being used in terms of the web application firewall, and essentially that brought a lot of connections to the back end and broke the application instantly. So for this specific example that I can think of, it's really important to work directly with the owner, or who's the lead developer for the application, to give us an information about what services in Azure, or maybe other information that connects the front end into the back end. So for the policies, we can have it modified and just do an exemption for that specific like service that you have, and just move move from that point onward. So it may not apply to other lines of businesses, but yeah, for that specific department, we can do an exemption.
All right, thank you. Yeah, yeah, this happens, But the follow-up question from Annalyn is that why don't you notify the developers first instead of applying right away? I'm sure there's a good reason, right?
There
When we
is,
think it's
yeah.
critical, yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that. Auto remediating something that's critical.
So I guess this will fall into the strategy that you have with your organization. So for us, we have, I mentioned earlier, the 30, 60, 90-day rule on reaching out or calling out specific owners that the specific service in Azure is non-compliant. So on the 30 days, it's more of a email communication, and we will not modify the policy to apply to your resource. And at the 60-day mark, we will try to at least call or book a meeting with you. And then on the 90 days, if we haven't really received any communication from your end, that's when we do the remediation. So um, to a point that we have allowed you 3 months at least on remediating the specific non-compliant resource. So that's why I guess it's ample time for you to take action on that specific call out that we've provided you. So to your point, notifying developers before applying, I guess it's more of a it's a in the governance world, it's a balancing act on when you do the remediation, but the strategy that we had is 30, 60, 90, and it's much more easier because if the owner replies that why did you make the change, we can just always send them the the evidence that we reach out about 2 or 3 times, but the service or the resource still remains non-compliant. So it's for the betterment of the whole company. So I guess it's the middle ground or the compromise that we have to think about.
Thank you, Peter. There you have it, Annalyn. I hope you feel better now. I can see, yeah, hugot yan. It's based from experience. I think Annalyn is feeling um, really emotional about these things. Don't worry, you're not alone. I feel you. I'm also on the developer side. So I know what it feels like. But I guess in the topic of governance, I would say that, prevention is better than cure, right? Yeah, right.
Yes.
So the first step is actually doing your well architected framework from the very beginning and assessing your application first, and see if there are parts or components of your application that will be non-compliant in the future, so that you can already mitigate that in your design before you implement it. But of course, we live in a real world. Sometimes we have already implemented and then comes a new policy that affects everyone, and it's quite frustrating. But that's why we are still in this industry and we have our jobs, which is a fun job. So
Yes.
otherwise, we don't have anything to do. So yeah, chill, stay relaxed. If you need support from the community when you're getting very feeling frustrated about Azure in general or technology in general, let's talk about it and let's share knowledge. And yes, and I think we are almost on top of the hour here. Peter, it's been really great, and I'm so happy. I hope this is not the first time that you're going to share. I really want maybe another session where we can go a little bit deep dive on some of those components that you mentioned. Let's say, Azure policies and cost monitoring is a big topic around the cloud world nowadays. And yeah, are back. So very important topic. So thank you so much for today.
All
Anything
right.
else? Any last statements before we end?
I guess I would only say that for everyone learning the cloud, don't skip on knowing the fundamentals because well, just to share, I've been part of an interview panel that I'd asked a very fundamental question, and the interviewee actually doesn't know what it means. So I think that's my parting words. Don't skip the fundamentals, build on it, and then you won't know in maybe 1 or 2 years. You might already be an architect like myself and also like Marilag.
Thank you so much, Peter. I love that. Don't skip the fundamentals. That's going to be our motto for this year, for 2023, for Azure User Group Manila. I hope I can quote you on that, Peter. Don't skip the fundamentals, folks. Thank you for joining us. And again, if you want to meet fellow Azure peeps in our group, join us on our Meetup, because that's where you can really see who the members are. We also have a Facebook group, and the Facebook group right now is just, how it is in Facebook. We need to have a little bit more control on who's joining, just so we can ensure that people who joins the group is really willing to learn and to contribute. So, but if you have colleagues and friends who are interested or within the Azure landscape, please invite them, join us, and let's make 2023 the year for Azure User Group Manila. Thank you so much. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Joanna Hipolito, my co-organizer for this event. Bye.
All right, bye.
Enjoy.
Thanks.